A very good morning from the KTN News Center this Sunday morning. Many thanks for joining us on Sunday edition on this 29th day of July 2018. Sunday edition begins right now. We have a myriad of issues to discuss and to dissect for the nation. We'll be talking about the issue of the opposition in Kenya. It's coming just less than 24 hours after one of the affiliate parties in the National Super Alliance, that is Wiper Democratic Movement Kenya, yesterday had the National Executive Council meeting and resolved to support President Uhuru Kenyatta's Jubilee government and to also support his agenda, or Jubilee's agenda, in Parliament. This coming hot on the heels of another said meeting between President Uhuru Kenyatta and the NASA leader Raila Odinga at the coast. What is happening? Is the opposition in Kenya effectively dead? We'll also talk about reports of a looming cabinet reshuffle. We understand sources indicating that up to 4 cabinet secretaries could be fired by the president. Did that meeting at the coast in the county of Kilifi have anything to do with that? We'll talk about some of the permutations and the performance of the cabinet so far, of course, in relation to what's happening, the Big Four agenda, and the war on corruption. And then we'll talk about Chapter 6. Is it finally having some casualties? Former Kenya Power boss Ben Chuma was rejected by Parliament because of integrity issues as a nominee for the Salaries and Remuneration Commission chairmanship. Should Kenyans be seeing more of this? Will they be seeing more of this? Or is it just a drop in the ocean? We'll talk about all that in the next 120 minutes or so. My panel is already here with me. I have with me, as always, lawyer and political strategist Kipchumba Karori, political analysts and communication experts Hesbon Owila and Mark Bichachi, as well as political risk analyst Dismas Mokua. Thank you for joining me, gentlemen. All right, but first, let's begin with what's happening, what's making a newspaper headlines this Sunday morning. All right, let's begin with the Sunday Standard and the headline: Uhuru and Raila in secret night talks. This is a working holiday that the president supposedly on at the coast. The president and the opposition leader did meet at the coast in the county of Kilifi, supposedly at Vipingo Ridge, and they had a 4-hour secret meeting. Dismas, what do you know about this?
Well, the fact that we are discussing it means that it's no longer a secret. But what we need to be asking ourselves is, what is this meeting all about? Is it about Mura and Wanjiko, or is it about their selfish interests? And one hopes that anytime President Kenyatta is having a conversation with Raila Odinga, it's actually about advancing the interest of all Kenyans. It's not about their cumulative selfish interest. And one expects that President Uhuru Kenyatta is going to take advantage of all the political capital and the political insurance given to him by Raila Odinga to take Kenya to the next level. So that if they're discussing about maybe fighting corruption, then we need to support them. If they're talking about a referendum, we need to give them support. But if they're having a conversation about their family businesses and selfish interest, then we must call them out. Because as a nation, we are not interested in leaders having meetings that do not take care of Wanjiko's interests.
Mark, do you think this will take care of Wanjiko's interests? Is this a development on that handshake? Is it proof that that partnership is continuing?
You're quite right, Ben. We can only build from the foundation that has already been set, and we know for a fact that the few times where Uhuru and Raila have met, what they have advanced is the handshake. From the first time in Harambee House when they did the handshake, the second time when they were at the prayer rally and they graduated to a hug, it can only be assumed that what they are discussing is in the same vein, because so far we've seen there is no intention of ODM folding up and becoming a subsidiary to Jubilee. We've not seen Raila Odinga acting as if he's about to get a CS position, as it were. So the reality of the matter is, I have to believe for now, based on the facts that I have seen, that the conversation is about Mora and Wanjiku and Maina and Nyongesa down in Western, because the country where it is, the fight against corruption, the big four, the freeze on spending on projects. There's so much that is happening. So I would imagine that when the two gentlemen meet, it is the country that is on the front page and not on the back page.
Hesbon, this happened on Thursday night. 2 days later, the Wiper Party had a NEC/PG meeting and resolved to support Jubilee's agenda, both the executive and in Parliament. Do you see this having anything to do with that meeting on Thursday?
Well, there's a sense in which President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Amolo Odinga set the political tone in the country, and probably you'd understand when other political parties like Wiper now join the fray, because the conversations over the last few months since the handshake have been about development, and I think that electioneering period and issues to do with the election has come to a closure.
Right.
And increasingly, people are beginning to look at this as something that is meant to benefit Wanjiku. And everyone is joining the fray, that if the two leaders are leading at the front and the conversations are about development, you realize that all other political players are basically running away from politicking and focusing on development anchored on the handshake. Right. Over the last few weeks, I think the politicians who have traversed the country have just been talking about that. Moses Kuria was in Nyanza, and I think he was just talking about handshake and development, that is supposed to improve the agricultural activities and economic activities in Nyanza. And I think that is where Wiper is following, just to join into the development conversation and less of politics.
All right, so, Kipchumba, this Wiper says is in the spirit of the handshake. Is this good for the country?
Yeah, it is good
for the democracy.
For the country, yes, but for the democracy, no. Because at the end of the day, we must have people at both ends, and we must, for leadership to be meaningful to the populace, we must have people holding different or divergent views, which will, in return, spur us to better economic heights. But if all of us have to think in one way, it will be catastrophic. But I think that the coming of Wiper to join Uhuru Kenyatta as a president, to help him spearhead and move on, and to cement the foundation laid by Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, it is a good move. Right. It should be emulated. But what I think should be done now is that Parliament should live to its duty, the oversight role. I hope that one is not being abdicated now that they have joined hands with President Uhuru Kenyatta. No. I hope they are joining hands with President Uhuru Kenyatta as far as development and going forward in this country is concerned.
Right.
But they should be able to have spine to call it out when there is something wrong.
All right, so that story is on the cover page of the Sunday Standard. You can check it out in more detail on page 6 of the Sunday Standard. On the Sunday Nation, the splash. Rift leaders see State House hand in Ruto troubles. Gentlemen, this story is not going anywhere anytime soon. Politicians who have spoken to the Sunday Nation, apparently allied to the Deputy President, seem to think that there's some underhand operations to make sure that the Deputy President does not ascend to power in 2022. Politicians saying that there's even a secretariat that has been formed with offices in Lavington and Gigiri to make sure that they lock Deputy President William Ruto from State House in 2022. Dismas, is this persists? This thing continues to persist. Does it mean it might grow ahead? Is it something that's real?
In my view, the Deputy President William Samoei Ruto needs to change his company. He's keeping horrible company. Because it's very clear, Kenya is not a monarchy. Mm-hmm. So we are going to have elections in 2022. Yeah. Assuming all factors are constant, we sort out IBC, and Kenya is ready for an election. Now, this is political competition. And when your enemies are putting together resources or assets to stop you from becoming a president, right, that is what is expected. When President Moi was a deputy president, there were people all over Kenya stopping him from becoming president. They would even stop him in the middle of roads in Nakuru and search his car. Never mind, he was the vice president then. Kibaki faced a similar situation. Uhuru has faced a similar situation. Yeah. So why do DP supporters and sycophants believe that he's supposed to be handed this position on a silver platter? why can't they put together their resources and assets and ensure that he wins this position? Why should they keep on crying every single day? And why are they overrating him? He should join the fray like any other person who wants to become president in 2022 and realize that not every Kenyan supports his candidature, do some sort of analysis, find out if indeed it's the case that at State House, and I don't know whether State House is synonymous with President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, but assuming State House doesn't want him to become a president, he should be taking advantage of the information he has and come up with strategies to neutralize that position. But you see, this idea of his supporters and sycophants drowning our noses and ears every single day that somebody wants to stop Ruto from becoming president. Right. It's not supposed to be automatic. In fact, the deputy president should be in cloud 9, break into a dance and song that people have realized is likely to become president today, and they're coming up with infrastructure to stop him. Right. But no, this kind of whining is unacceptable. You recall a few days ago when President Kenyatta said he wants everybody to undergo a lifestyle audit, and his supporters and sycophants went to Mount Kenya and started making noise. And then that makes Kenyans believe that in fact there would be issues around deputy president's wealth and candidature. They should just let the water flow, let the water go down the stream. But this idea of...
So his lieutenants are not doing him any favors?
They're not, actually. Right. I mean, I was in my village a few days ago and they were asking me, how come every now and again, when President Kenyatta speaks about corruption and lifestyle audits, it's the deputy president's supporters and sycophants who are up in arms.
Okay. Mark, do you believe there are power brokers hell-bent on making sure William Ruto does not ascend to power in 2022?
I believe Kenya is a democracy, and if they are not doing that, then we're letting democracy down. The fact of the matter is, even when you apply for a job to be a presenter at KTN, there'll be many, many people who are trying to stop you. I do not understand what this whole furor is about, because it does not make sense. It does not make sense strategically, because the question is, the net result, is it that you want people to pity you? And what are they pitying you for? What exactly are you going to achieve when people read that article? Those MPs who wrote these things seem to lack strategic thinking. But the third part is this, that William Ruto, on one hand, presents a very powerful and clever and intuitive and witty and cunning political person. He seems very shrewd. But the moment you go one rank down, it's as if you drop from genius level IQ to kindergarten. Because, as Dismas has said, the kind of politics his lieutenants are playing are politics that have no direction, politics that will only serve to cause questions on the character of William Ruto, and number two, to consolidate those people who are against him. This is the net result. This is what I mean. If today someone is sitting in central Kenya, western Kenya, wherever, and hopes that Ruto is not president, then them saying that there is a camp that is successfully trying to stop him emboldens those people. Right. So they are not serving to discredit the people who think that he should not be president. They're actually emboldening them because they're telling them, you know what, there's actually a secretariat and there's actually people trying to stop Ruto. So all of this strategy, whichever way you look at it, is they're shooting themselves in the foot.
Right. Husband, is what they're trying to say that there are people within Jubilee Party who should be supporting, but they're wanting to lock him out? Is that what they're trying to say, that it's their own people inside the party? Or is that also part of democracy?
Well, I think there are two things here. That democracy is a contest, where conflicting ideas contend. And there are people who want the deputy president to ascend to the presidency. There are people who don't want. And for as long as we have those conflicting ideas, we'll always have fights towards power. And then the second thing is what you're saying, that probably there is actually nothing. There is no one who is conspiring to stop him. But because he wants to appear like he's the front runner, and the entire State House machinery is out to stop him. And of course, this is not even State House. I think we need to say the truth, that they are targeting a clique of the ruling elite. It is not State House. And I think from a perception point of view, they're just trying to elevate the deputy president. That is what I'm seeing, by creating a situation where he's at a pedestal that is so high that people are targeting him. And the reason why they are doing that is very simple. Because if you look at the position that the deputy president occupies and the history that brought him there, he has supported President Uhuru Kenyatta in 2 successive elections,
Yes.
and he has been with him. So by creating that perception that he has been betrayed, there is a sense in which they will get some sort of, always, the person who is betrayed by the powers that be gets some sort of sympathy from the masses, and the masses tend to identify with him.
Right.
So probably this is their own creation, and that is what I tend to believe, that it is their own creation. And just like Dismas says, I mean, crying over such things in a democracy does not make sense. Democracy in itself means that if the deputy president does whatever he has to do for the people of Kenya,
Yes.
the people of Kenya will evaluate him
All
on
right.
the basis of that.
Kipchumba, do you think that he should stop crying about it, so to speak, or should he remind the nation that indeed I supported this camp for 2 elections and now they won't say, is it important for him to have that narrative?
Ben, when I first read that heading, I was taken aback.
Yeah.
It goes against all principles of political strategy. Even if it is reverse engineering, it goes against. But the deputy president, as a person, is a very strong candidate. If he decides to vie for president, he's a very strong person. But the problem is, as somebody said with his lieutenants, the whining will never win any vote. Nobody wins an election by whining each day. People win election by sitting down and addressing issues. And then again, we cannot and we should not forget that politics is about interests. There is nothing wrong, unless this is a Gestapo. There is nothing wrong with anybody having a secretariat. The Runda and Gigirwan are few. There are supposed to be as many as even 100.
Yeah.
We need to have them at county level. That is why we have a democracy. And by this having this headline, it presupposes that the deputy president ought to have been the only candidate in the 2022 presidential election, which is a facade.
Yes.
It is wrong.
All right.
That election will have candidates. It will be tough. The other thing is this. By looking at our newspapers, if you are a visitor at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, you will think this country will be going to election in the next 3 months, which is a wrong thing. 4 years is a very long time. Reading the autobiographies of all our former leaders and the strong people in this country will show you something. It will show you that elections in this country are won in the last 6 to 4 months to the election. That is when elections are won. But anyway, in between, we are a political nation. Politics must be discussed. Secondly, then our media. At times, our media also has to be called out. For the longest time possible, you have been thriving in creating numbers or selling newspapers and to create numbers.
Yes, that's
the
the
problem
business.
is this. It is the business.
Yeah.
But the problem is this. You also have a role in unifying this country and setting the national agenda. Is this the agenda you want us to set? Look at the newspapers. Uhuru, Raila talks.
But is there anything that's not true over there?
It might be true, but is that the agenda you want to set? Secondly, the other thing is this. For the longest time possible, it has always been Raila against Uhuru Kenyatta. Now that that one is not selling after the handshake on 9th March, you have now found another way of creating profits. Ruto against Uhuru Kenyatta. Now, where are we heading?
Maybe
Don't
we
allow
should chip in.
Kipchumba to commit murder on a national
I was
asset
waiting
like
for him
this.
to finish.
No, I have not finished.
you've given-
So Kipchumba, you say that the media should bury its heads in the sand.
What I'm requesting, Ben, is responsible journalism. At times, we have serious issues. We have issues happening in Talo Oil. What has been, those people, there are problems there.
Yeah,
but
that's why this
reverse
newspaper
back,
has 60 pages. All that is covered.
the other
But
thing is
let's
this,
move on.
finally,
Let's move on. Yes, very
Kenya is
quickly.
not Cuba. You know, people must realize that,
All right.
that the presidency will be handed over to the next person. This country will be subjected to an election.
Yes.
So, the fears and all these, people should just realize that in 2022,
Yes.
it will be a contest where IBC or whatever outfit will have to conduct elections will come out and announce that from this date we'll be receiving documents from candidates.
All
So
right.
I think people should just hold their horses, go and implement their manifestos in the villages.
All right. Wanawakili has spoken. Let's, speaking of elections and presidential polls, Zimbabwe is set to go to the polls tomorrow. There are 23 presidential candidates. Of course, the leading ones are President Emerson Mnangagwa of ZANU-PF, who will be the ZANU-PF candidate, and Nelson Chamisa of the MDC Alliance. So they are supposed to go to the polls. The results are supposed to come by August 4th, I believe. If nobody has 50% plus one, just like in Kenya, they go to a presidential poll runoff this month. What do you see happening? I mean, the world will be focusing its eyes on Zimbabwe. It has been criticized as having been led by a dictator, that is Robert Mugabe. So what do you see coming out of this election?
Well, number one, Zimbabwe offers our leaders many lessons. That if you have been elected to office, please serve Mura and Wanjiku to the best of your ability. And when it's time, take a walk. For some reason, Robert Mugabe was under the impression that he's the only one who can run the nation, and he's now left office. And a number of people in Zimbabwe are actually surprised that they're going for an election when Mugabe is not in the ballot. But be that as it may, the current president is no different from any other dictator, because they don't have, I mean, the equivalent of IBC is not free, fair, nor credible. In fact, it's the current president who made the announcement when the elections were going to take place. There are even allegations that he organized an assassination so that it gives him the opportunity to flex his muscles and beat everybody towards the path that he wants. But really, at the end of the day, a change is as good as a rest. So the people of Zimbabwe have got an opportunity to get a leader, and maybe we give them 5 years when they can get a solid leader. Because Mnangagwa, as history has captured him, is no different from Mugabe. He's the one who executed all evil policies as are dictated by Mugabe. So really, it's nothing different.
Right.
Because if you were to look at Mugabe and the atrocities he visited the people in Zimbabwe, if you had a solid president, then he would be facing so many charges. But right now, he's very happy. When he wants to go to Malaysia or Singapore, he's given state protection, given state assets, and he's treated with kid gloves. But I think that would be a good lesson for politicians, especially the ones in Kenya, to learn that when you are given office, please do your duty for your time, 10 years, serve the nation. Don't use your office as a factor of production, because that's what Mugabe did. He used his office as a factor of production, accumulated so much wealth, stepped on the toes of everybody, and at some stage he even imagined that his wife would actually become president. And I suspect it's the same thing that some politicians in Kenya are thinking of, that they don't want to face competition. So Mugabe created competition for himself. He just wanted the wife to take over. And before I forget, let's go back to what Kipchumba had indicated. Who defines responsible journalism in Kenya? Is it the Uhuru camp, the Ruto camp, or the best practices in journalism? So if the reports which irritate Uhuru or which irritate Ruto, as the case seems to be the case, then we shouldn't say that journalists are not doing their work. You go attend a function, and Ruto's sycophants and supporters are discussing 2022 instead of discussing the sugar crisis we have in Kenya, the monetary crisis we have in Kenya, the fiscal crisis we have in Kenya. What do you expect the journalists to do or the reporter to do? To come back and say these guys are discussing global warming, or report it as it is?
Thank you for that salvo on Kipchumba. You will not comment on that. Let me come to you, Mark. Chamisa says, or was telling his supporters in the last rally, that victory is as good as in the bag. Do you think it is time for change for Zimbabwe, or do you think ZANU-PF will still come out on top?
Time for change in Zimbabwe came 18 years ago, so they're 18 years too late for change. However, Zimbabwe right now is at a very interesting time. Mnangagwa seems to have reinvented himself. The very fact that he's kept his promise in doing this election this year is testimony to the fact that he's bowing to the pressure of becoming a legitimate president, because his legitimacy as a president, he came in under a very sophisticated coup. The second part is he was considered, as Dismas has said, the arm that was executing Zimbabweans. However, at the same time, we've had very few cases of hands being chopped off, of people being terrorized across the country by the Veteran Association. So that reduction, of course, is something that the international community is looking at, to see that maybe this may be an election that may not be perfect, but it might be better than what has happened before. MDCT, which is the regional MDC, because MDC broke up into very many small pieces after the late Prime Minister left the Prime Ministership and then consequently fell ill. MDCT is doing very, very well. Why is it doing very well? Number one, because of and this is sad, but it's a sympathy vote because of the death of Morgan Tsvangirai. It cannot be ignored. Number two, this guy is very eloquent. He's young, he's energetic, and he captures the aspirations of our people. Right. When he was attacked, I think it was in 2008, it gave him that martyr status. So this is going to be a question of whether MDCT can expand its base beyond the urban areas of Zimbabwe, because that's where traditionally MDC has been powerful. If they can begin to capture what has been predominantly ZANU-PF territory, even to the 20-30%, then there is a chance that he wins. Right. But my prediction for the people, I think Mnangagwa will take it, because ZANU-PF is still quite powerful in the villages. But on that salvo that Dismas fired, I would like to add some fire to it. We cannot blame the foolishness of our headlines on the journalists. We have to blame it on the foolishness of our MPs. We have MPs in this country who have said rain comes from heaven and has nothing to do with trees.
All right.
We have
Enough
MPs in this country who think that the Kisii are divided and they need to be united. This is the problem. So yes. So
all right. Enough said. Kipchumba has had very quickly Hezbollah. In Tanzania in 2015, there was this Ukawa coalition, the opposition. They were very noisy, and people said CCM's time is up, but we know what happened. Do you think it's going to be the same in Zimbabwe, or are we going to see real change in that part of the continent?
Well, I don't think there's going to be any real change. I mean, ZANU-PF will sail through. Though it's refreshing to see what MDCT is doing. But it's also important to note that the reason why Mnangagwa is calling for this election soon after taking over power in a very interesting fashion is because he wants an election when he still has the reins of power and control over the government. And that tells you clearly that the fact that the election is coming soon has nothing to do with the local mwananchi in Zimbabwe. It's just to ensure that they use the clout that they still have as folks who are still suffering from the hangover of Mugabe's exit to win power and legitimize themselves.
Kipchumba, do you think Zimbabwe has the instruments to have a free and fair election?
Looking at the conduct for the last 1 month, I think they cannot afford a free and fair election. An election whereby Mnangagwa is the one calling the election, setting the date, and all these other things, the parameters are not free to allow the word free to prevail in the election. But be it as it may, there are some other factors that you have to consider. That Mnangagwa, this election is his to lose for the reason that he is calling this election to consolidate power, one, because the power he has currently is not from the Mwananchi, it is a backroom power. Secondly, is this election, from where I sit, is the final purge on the Mugabe adherents who remained there. I think is the final thing is in the coffin that Mugabe was and his legacy. This election will clear everybody. But there is an interesting twist there. There is the team that seemed to have been in favor of Mugabe's wife, the under 40 team.
Yes.
Because the teams were two, Lacoste and under 40. You don't know where the under 40 team is. And why MDCT is rejuvenated might be because there are people who have shifted their alliances there with money. That is what I will watch to see. But be it the fact that will play out is that MDCT will gain more seats. It will not win the election, but its footprints will get.
All right, thanks. We will be, of course, telling you what will be happening in that Zimbabwe election. Zimbabweans going to the polls tomorrow. 23 presidential candidates wanting to lead the nation. The two leading ones, of course, President Emmerson Mnangagwa of ZANU-PF and the charismatic Nelson Chamisa with the MDC alliance. The results are expected by August 8th. If no candidate wins 50% plus one, they will be going for a runoff by September 8th. Let's take a quick commercial break here on Sunday edition. When we come back, we'll be asking this question, is the opposition in Kenya dead? Don't go too far.